Hello everybody and welcome back. This is Mystic Games. Today we're going to be talking Blackrock Mountain minis for Warcraft Rumble. We're going to start as normal with the leaders. I'll do a little bit of discussion. I'll talk about the talents and I'll talk about what I like to use and what I think is good. And then I will go into the spells because I think that's the next most important thing. And then talking about essentially the units that you have the ability to get. So let's jump in. We're going to start with General Drakaseth. I think he's probably one of the most useful of the leaders here. He's very powerful. So what he has is he's a slow-moving, elemental damaging tank, and he has resistance. So he has just reduced damage to any elemental attacks, and then he pretty much makes all enemies take additional 50% elemental damage. His abilities are he grants nearby allies resistance trait. That's chromatic scales. I would say that's probably the best one. And then he also has one where he drops the banner on death for 10 seconds and essentially just gives his leader debuff to all the enemies around him. And then you have piercing blows, which attacks enemies in a straight line and does essentially AoE damage. Chromatic scales is definitely the best. It just gives all your allies resistance around him. Means you're not going to take as much damage from elemental attacks. A lot of the AoE attacks in the game are elemental, so that pretty much takes away a massive amount of damage from other units. He pairs well with the Frostwolf Shaman from the Horde video I did last time, and you pretty much drop the Frostwolf Shaman, give the armored to him, and then he becomes an armored resistant tank that makes everyone else around him resistant and makes all the enemies not resistant. Just super strong. Anyways, one of my favorites. There's a lot of cheese strategies you can use General Drakaseth with for. People use him against Onyxia to great avail at low levels. It works well. So enough about General Drakaseth. I think we've talked enough about him. Super good. One of probably the best minis for the Blackrocks. Next, we're going to talk about Ren Blackhand. He's the flying mini leader. What he does is when you throw him down, he is on his dragon. He deals elemental damage. He essentially is like a Drake. He shoots fire out in front of him. And then when the Drake dies, he jumps off the Drake and starts slamming people with his sword. Pretty much he reduces the cost of all flying minis in his rotation of his deck by 1, but no less than 2. I wish that was actually no less than 1, but it's no less than 2. Anyways, his best talent is usually Scale and Steel. That's when he gains resistant while flying, and then when he falls to the ground, he becomes armored. Sometimes you can use Legionnaire, which is he dismounts when taking damage, and then the Drake continues to fight, and you have 2 separate units fighting together. That can be useful in certain situations. And then you have Flaming Soul, where he gets dismounted, he casts Living Bomb on everybody, and they explode, which can be good if it does enough damage. I like Ren Blackhand because he makes flying units better. He's a very unique leader in the sense that he just makes flying units better. So if you're trying to make a deck with a lot of flying minis, he's very good at that. Overall, I think he's an okay mini. I don't think he's super strong, but I think he is good. And as I said, he opens up a lot of new strategies. Next, we're going to talk about Emperor Thurasan. So he deals elemental damage. Non-elemental damage will deal fire, and then attacks pretty much hit an area when he attacks. While in play, all your other minis will gain burn if they're not dealing elemental damage. The only issue with this ability is that a lot of the Blackrock minis deal elemental damage, so you have to pick a team that doesn't have elemental damage as its base to make this really useful. My favorite unit for him is Harpies, because if you have Poison Taloned Harpies, which we'll talk about in a future video, I think Beasts are next, actually. Actually, are Beasts last? It might be Undead and then Cenarian now, and then Beast. It's actually, I think, the order. Anyways, Harpies have poison. If you put them in a deck with Emperor Thurazon, he adds burn to their talons, and it just eats things up. It's crazy. It does a lot of damage. He also has Hubris after playing a minion. This is one of his talents. Your non-elemental mini deploys with +2 health. Again, that works super well with Harpies. You drop him, you drop the Harpies, and they just are leveled up, and then they deal a ton of damage. You also have Moria's Wit, which nearby burning enemies heal him. That's okay. It makes him a little more tanky. He is decently tanky for like a ranged mini as well. And then he has Incinerate. Lava Spike's burn is permanent. It just makes it longer. It's not permanent on everything. So, I do like Thurazon because, again, his Fiery Weapon enchantment makes a little bit like different gameplay and different deck building. I wish that it wasn't while he was in play. I don't think it's strong enough to force you to have Emperor Thurazon in play for them to have put that stipulation on it. Anyways, we're going to talk about Ragnaros now. He's extremely hard to unlock. He is the final raid boss right now, and there is some level of scaling to get to this guy. So, not many people have him. I have not unlocked him myself, but we will go over him. He kind of works a little bit different. Like, so he deals elemental damage. He's resistant. He's a tank. Pretty much what he does is he attaches himself to a tower or a base, and he puts his life on it, and then he's able to cast special abilities. Pretty much it allows him to do different things while he's in play, cast different spells. So he can summon Sons of Flame at 50% health, summon 2 fire elementals that last 8 seconds. That's one of his talents. That's probably the best one. Most people tend to use that. Concussive Blast, Blast Wave, leave enemies stunned for 2 seconds. And then you also have Radiant Flame, so it's buildings you control periodically damage nearby enemies. Most of the time people use Sons of Flame and then Concussive Blast. They seem to be the 2 best so far. I can't say too much about the guy because I don't know much. Armored allies deal a small amount of damage back to their attackers. That's not super great for a leader ability, but at least he doesn't have to be on the field for it to work. That's what I will say about that. So we're going to jump into spells. We're going to start with Smoke Bomb. It's a 1-cost, pretty much as a cycle spell. It just makes everything invisible. It is a useful spell in certain situations. Like, pretty much it's good for defending weak units. So normally backline ranged units, if you have Smoke Bomb in your deck, you drop Smoke Bomb on them when you're about to engage. And it will allow them to turn invisible and potentially have them target your tank instead of them. But outside of that, it's not the best. Most people like to use Through the Shadows, which is affected minis move faster until they're de-stealthed. You also have Strangers in the Night, effects apply to the enemies as well, which turns them invisible, which I don't know why. Normally you don't want to turn your enemy invisible. I mean, there's, again, niche uses to... It's essentially for control. You can stealth some of them so you aim at a different target. And then you have Band of Thieves, grants +1 level to cycle minis within. So it has some synergy with cycle units. I don't see many people use Smoke Bomb, though, I will say that. Next we have Living Bomb. This is a really fun spell. It does a ton of damage, but it costs a lot of gold. Most people use Blast Radius with it. It burns enemies like within the radius. You also have Chain Reaction, which tends to be used a lot as well, which is it explodes and then it puts more Living Bombs on other targets that did not initially get Living Bomb, and then they explode as well. You can essentially clear a whole wave with this. It's really good. That talent in particular is very good in a lot of like raids and stuff in dungeons, because you can know that bosses are going to spawn a lot of minis, and then you just can chain reaction them and just clear waves of minis. And then you have Burden of Fate, which affected enemies are just dazed, which slows them down. Not super amazing, but it has its uses. Last but not least, we're going to talk about Deep Breath, which, funnily enough, Blackrock has 2 minis that are locked behind defeating extremely powerful enemies. But for killing Onyxia, you get the Deep Breath ability. So what it does is it shoots fire down in like essentially like a line, and it deals damage. So Melting Point removes armor on minis that get hit by it. You also have the Double Dragon, which casts a second wave in the opposite direction. And then you have Attunement. Allies caught in the effect gain resist. Melting Point can be good because getting rid of armor is pretty strong, and then Double Dragon is just additional damage. Attunement is everybody gets resist. I think that's self-explanatory. But normally, again, you're going to be using Dracosith. You wouldn't like use that with Dracosith, and wouldn't make sense because he already does that for you. So we're going to jump into the minis here, starting with the Core Hounds. The Core Hounds are super cool idea. Again, they're extremely expensive. I think that's probably their biggest weakness. I would say for like facing them, they can be super annoying, but when you're using them, they normally get countered so like super hard. What they do is when one dies, they'll start to resurrect the other. And it's about, I would say, 3 seconds, and then it comes back up, so you have to kill the other Core Hound within like 3 to 4 seconds, and then it respawns the other one. And if you kill them both, they just die. So you have Fiery Rebirth, which is one of the talents, which is on resurrection, damage nearby enemies. You also have Guard Dog, which deals 50% additional damage near friendly towers and meeting stones. And then you have Eternal Bond, which is resurrection range is unlimited. I like Eternal Bond because I like to do split pushes with the Core Hound, because normally the enemy will target one lane. The issue with the Core Hound split strategy is that you need to push like one lane really hard and then have the other one not, and then hope that the one that's not getting in the opposite lane is getting killed. But cool mini, just too expensive for what it does for the player, and therefore I would say it's not very good. Next up is the Dark Iron Miner. He's our boy right here with the red beard. He's an Unbound mini, and he collects gold. He's very nice to have in any kind of dungeon or PvE situation where you need to control money. He is very strong. He's okay in PvP as well for controlling gold. Pretty much you just put him in your deck if you want to have a cheap mini that you can use to collect gold on a map. Some of his best traits are Gold Mine, which is he drops a bomb after mining, so anything walking near the gold mine will explode. This is very good for keeping enemy miners from getting it, because they'll pretty much run into the bombs and then die when they go to mine it. It just helps you lock down the mining thing, so you're going to have control over gold. And then you have Dwarven Ambition, which is a good backup, which is he gains Fury when fighting, which also increases his mining speed. And then you have, after he mines, he gains Armor, is his other talent, and that one's not really used. It's usually Fury or Gold Mine. I tend to use Fury more than I use Gold Mine. I used to use Gold Mine a lot. I tend to like Fury better. For the Dwarven Miner, I think it's a little nicer to have the faster attack speed and the faster mining speed, because normally I'm just there to have him take the mine. And I've noticed that when I used to drop the mines around the gold veins, that they would get triggered, and it would be from like a unit and not the kobold that was trying to mine it, and it would just cancel out the whole reason for me to drop it. Alright, so next we're going to talk about Drake. Drake is a very versatile unit. I would say it's a pretty strong unit. It's not super strong, like I'm not saying it's like an S tier unit by any means. You guys can watch my tier list if you want to see where I marked it, but it is a versatile unit in the sense that it has different usages, and it is used in some high level play for specific fights. So he deals elemental damage. It's in a cone in front of him, and it just burns everything with fire. The talent that I like the most is Mother Drake. I think this is generally the most widely used talent. It drops eggs as it goes, and then those eggs hatch, and you have a little Drake that shoots fire. Fantastic. The normal one that people like to use after that is Engulfing Flames, which is damaging enemies burns them. So essentially just starts them on fire when he shoots out the fire breath as well. And then you have Roost, which it perches on a nearby tower, staying there to defend it. So pretty much it flies to the closest tower, it sits over it, and then as soon as the tower gets attacked, it flies up and it will fight things at the tower. Which is one of the abilities that's very useful in a different strategy, because having a unit stop and patrol something essentially can be very useful and strong. I'm not going to go into that. There's plenty of guides on how to use Roost properly, but generally you're going to want to use Mother Drake. Next we have the Earth Elemental. It's an armored unbound mini that you can throw down that does sage damage. It's generally meant for taking towers. We're not going to go too much into its stats. We'll talk about the talents though. The best one is on death, where it splits into smaller Earth Elementals. And then you also have Sharpnel Blast, which destroying a tower deals damage to nearby enemies. And then you have Ready to Rumble, which it taunts on deploy, which generally you don't want, because normally you're using this to backdoor towers. This mini's okay, it has its uses, but it's not anything crazy. Next we're going to talk Fire Elemental. Fire Elemental is one of my favorite tanks in the game. I use this in almost all of my decks. I think it's extremely strong, and I think it's underrated. Super good in a lot of PvP. Or not PvP. Well, actually, it is good in PvP. I've used it in PvP to pretty well success, too. But it's very, very good in PvE in particular. So, as I said, he's a tank, he's elemental, and he has resistance. So, he's naturally resistant to elemental attacks. My favorite talent form is Emotion Aura, which is he pretty much deals fire damage around him very slowly. When the elemental attacks as well, he does like a cleaving attack that literally hits everything around him, and it's just insane. And then you have, for different talents, you have Molten Core, which is on death, he summons Lava Pool, that's okay. Normally how I play him, he doesn't die, so that's not useful for me. And then you have Fans of the Flames, taking elemental damage increases damage dealt by 10% up to 30. I can see Fans of Flames being useful in the way that I play with the elemental, but I think Emotion Aura tends to be just better. It just does a small amount of damage over time, and along with his cleaving attacks, very strong. Again, this is one of those units you drop with the Frostwolf Shaman, and it gains armored, and then it's resistant to all types of attacks, and has a healer behind it, and it just hits everything as it moves. As long as they cannot kill your healer, he will pretty much go forever. I highly, highly recommend the Fire Elemental as one of your early minis. If you need a tank for a leader, he's very, very strong. And then we're going to talk about the Fire Hammer next. I do like the Fire Hammer, but I think it's it does the same job with every talent you give it. So it's an elemental damage dealer, it has range, it has fury. If it's not getting attacked, it will build up damage and become very, very strong very quickly. If it gets attacked, it dies and then it's useless. It has an okay price point at 4 gold. The issue is I would say Darkspear Troll is a little bit better than the Fire Hammer because it's 3 gold. But anyways, let's talk about the talents. So it has Molten Metal, which it deals 50% more damage to flying minis. That's a solid one to use. Another one that people like to use is Heightened Rage, which it levels up upon reaching full fury. So then I think that stacks to 3 times, so you can get 3 levels on her. The issue with that is, again, she needs to survive that long. And then you also have Blazing Speed, which is fury built up to 40%. And it just makes fury better. The issue is, generally the one I would say is the most useful is Molten Metal, because you're generally using this to counter air. This is one of those minis that I like, but I think it's better for the enemy, like the computer to use versus you. So that's what I'll say about the Fire Hammer. Not a bad mini, not a great mini, has its uses. You have Flame Waker. Now this is a mini I don't rate highly, but is super strong in a lot of situations for the enemy to use, because taking out the back line, which the Flame Waker is really good at, is super strong in this game. There's a lot of, like, if you get a wave going a lot of the times, the Flame Waker is a very good counter to destroying that wave in your push and just making you essentially have to start over. Against the enemy, generally not as good, because normally you have control of the flow of battle in this game. So that's a separate video. We might talk about that after I go over all the minis, but control and flow of battle is an interesting whole concept of this game. So what the Flame Waker does is it fires out a fire wave in front of it, and it goes and hits multiple targets. It can only hit ground units, but it only needs to hit ground units. And then you have the ability to use the talent Heat Stroke, which is damaging enemies are dazed. That can be super useful because it controls the enemy, which this whole character is about controlling the enemy. You also have Engulf, which is it burns the enemy, so after it hits them with a wave, they actually start on fire and take additional damage. And then you have Backdraft, which is it increases the attack distance of his attacks, so he can attack farther with every strike. The issue with that is it resets on movement. It is useful, but it's useful in very situational situations. So normally you're going to want to use Heat Stroke and Engulf with the Flame Waker. Next up we have the Molten Giant. He has gotten improvements. He has been buffed quite a bit because he was initially a 6-cost mini that was just not very good. It's a tank, it has armored, and it's very good. It has siege damage, or siege, so it can deal very good damage to like towers. The talents it has are Blood of the Mountain, which is on death it explodes, damaging nearby enemies. That can be useful because it does an AoE strike on death, which just helps clear units around it. And normally it's beefy enough where it's going to build up units around it. It has Bolster, which it heals itself when destroying a tower, a small amount. And then you have Threatening Presence, which it gains Taunt. All of these are pretty useful in their own right. I would say Blood of the Mountain can be super strong, and I also believe Threatening Presence can be very good because forcing units to attack this so they're not attacking your other units is very powerful. Next we're going to talk Pyromancer. This is one of my favorite minis. It's a 3-cost mini, as you can see here. What it does is it shoots out a fireball that does AoE damage to the targets around the fireball. It has 2 generally used talents, and then it has a 3rd talent that most people don't use. So the first talent is Pyroblast. Essentially it triples the damage on the first attack. That's insane because you're at least going to get 1 attack off, and that 1 attack is going to probably kill most of the enemies around it and the enemy that it hits. The other talent that I like to use is Conflagrate, which is it just makes the splash area for the fireball twice as big. So it's just going to hit more units. I think both of them are useful. I think obviously Conflagrate is better if you are able to defend the Pyromancer, because then you're going to have multiple fireballs going off, and hitting more units with those fireballs is going to be better. If you're more or less using this unit just to get 1 attack out, though, Pyroblast is obviously better. We're not going to even talk about the last talent. If you guys get the Pyromancer, you should either get Pyroblast or Conflagrate as your first ability, depending on how you like to play the game. Normally, I would say Pyroblast if you're newer, because then you're at least getting use out of it. Conflagrate requires a little bit more setup, and you want to keep it alive, and it is a fragile unit. Last but not least, we're going to talk about the Whelp Eggs. Now, this is like an S-tier unit. This has a lot of uses. So we're going to talk about it. So you drop it in the game, you drop it. It creates 3 eggs. And when those eggs get hit, they open up and they hatch. And the whelps come out and they attack. It's unbounded, so it can be dropped anywhere. And it creates 3 eggs. Now, the talent that you would want to get with this is Flame Burst. There are 2 other talents, but they don't matter. So Flame Burst is when the enemies hit the eggs and they break them, they explode, dealing damage before the dragons come out. And it's essentially like dropping a little spell on the map, because anything that's in melee range that hits these eggs is going to take massive damage, and then you're going to create 3 little units that shoot fireballs out as well. So in a best case scenario, you're going to get the eggs are going to get hit by melee units, explode on them, and then they're going to spawn 3 flying dragons that can't be hit by those melee units that are just going to start shooting fireballs down on them. Anyways, that's all you really need to know about Whelp Eggs. They're super good. You can throw them down on like melee units on the map with Flame Burst, and it will kill them. My recommendation is as soon as you get uncommon, you don't take any talents until you see Flame Burst, and you buy Flame Burst, and this will help you a lot in a lot of different PvE situations to level and continue getting better at the game and giving you more playtime with the game. It's a good unit you can throw in almost any deck, and it just helps. It's like having essentially it's like having a spell and a unit rolled into one, which is super nice. It's similar to the Alliance unit that has the gyrocopter that comes down and crashes and blows up on everybody. I already talked about it a couple videos ago. Anyways, that's all your Blackrock Mountain minis. I hope this guide helps people a little bit. The reason I'm making these is I really do enjoy this. I think this is a really good game. It has a lot of potential. It's one of Blizzard's pretty much first mobile games, though. So there's patching issues a lot of the time and download type issues. And a lot of the creators that actually do content that are much bigger than me, I actually get really frustrated because it's understandable. It's a very good game and it has a lot of potential, and it's really upsetting to have issues and bugs when you know the game can be so good. Anyways, I'll catch you guys in the next one. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you again soon. Later.